Very much. Meanwhile, Washington in the fast lane, top lawmakers on both sides of the aisle reaching a deal to give the president fast-track authority to move forward on trade negotiations. It is likely to start a tough battle, though, for President Obama with his own party. I sat down with House Speaker John Boehner in a Fox Business exclusive. We talked about the progress on the fast-track authority, but when I asked him about tax reform, he said the challenges to getting something done, well, that's a bigger issue.
It's hard to do tax reform without the active involvement of the administration. The Treasury Department has access to more information, frankly, than we do in terms of the impact of changes in the tax law. And so there's a conversation that's been underway between the White House and the House and Senate for months now over, if we had tax reform, what would it look like? Because there is no reason to run up this mountain, all the work that's involved, unless the administration is actively engaged in it. We want tax reform. It's critically important for our country. We've got a tax system that no one understands, not even the IRS understands. It hurts our economic growth. It hurts our economy. It hurts wages in America. And if we had a flatter, simpler tax code that would allow 95% of the American people to do their own taxes, we'd have a much healthier economy, creating a lot more jobs.
But has the window now closed in order to actually see real progress on that at this point?
Well, the window's never closed. I was born with a glass half full.
In terms on trade, which is so important for American business, and in particular the Trans-Pacific Partnership and its fast-track status, where does that stand?
We had a meeting this week on Trade Promotion Authority, which is critical if we're going to get to a real agreement, either with the Asians or with the Europeans. And we're making a lot of progress. I expect that we're going to see action on both the House and Senate next week in committee to deal with this issue. Trade is critically important to the U.S. We've got the lowest barriers to trade in the world. All these trade agreements tend to work to our benefit in terms of opening markets for U.S. products overseas. But I do think we're going to have a challenge. The President's party here in Congress are catering to the unions who, for whatever reason, are adamantly opposed to this. And they've spent the last 3.5 years working Democrat members in opposition to Trade Promotion Authority. And I've asked the President to reach out, because we're going to need Democrats to pass Trade Promotion Authority. But at the end, I think we'll get there, because it's hard for me to imagine that Democrats here in the House or Senate are going to walk away from their president, America's president, but their own party at a time when this is one of his areas that could be a big accomplishment for him.
So what's the likelihood that the trade issues get resolved and we actually do see some legislation?
Oh, I think you're going to see legislation as early as next week. And I do believe over the next several months you'll see this enacted. But it's going to be a pretty heavy lift.
Let me ask you about presidential politics right now. Assess the field for us in terms of who's out there and who's the best candidate to go up against Hillary Clinton.
Well, we got a lot of good candidates out there, and they'll sort this out themselves. I've been a Jeb Bush supporter for a long time, a longtime friend of mine, colleague, and I think he'd do a great job. But we got a lot of good candidates, and they're going to have to go sort this out themselves.
What happens if John Kasich from your hometown puts his hat in the ring? Does that change your allegiance to Jeb Bush?
Listen, John and I have been friends for 30 years, and I think he'd be a great candidate.
What is your observation to Hillary officially announcing?
Well, what's she going to do for America? That's the real question. It's not about personalities. I think that the fact that she won't turn over her server, the fact that she's ignored the law when it comes to how she was supposed to communicate as the Secretary of State, those questions are going to continue to haunt her until she comes clean, until some independent third party goes through these emails and determines which ones are public and which ones are clearly private.
It doesn't seem like she's going to allow that. I mean, do you think that really a third party, independent party, will get that server?
I don't know that she could stonewall this for the next year and a half.
And right now we're talking about an incredibly serious talk with Iran in terms of that nuclear deal. Talk to us about that.
Well, the more I hear about what the president said, the so-called framework, then the Iranians the next day said, well, there is no agreement on this so-called framework. So all we have is an elaborate way of saying we're going to talk for 90 more days. I've never been optimistic that we get to an agreement, a real agreement that would stop the nuclear threat from Iran. And I don't think the Iranians have any intention of giving up their desire for a nuclear weapon. And so I don't know, at the end of the day, how you get to an agreement.
So how does this play out then? I mean, will you be able to, number one, weigh in? Will Congress be able to weigh in on a deal? Well,
the president this week came out and supported the bill that Senator Corker and Senator Menendez have put together that allows Congress to have an up or down vote on this in 30 days. And I'm not sure why the White House decided to go along with this, either because they thought we were going to jam it down their throats, or because they don't think there's going to be an agreement. I'm not sure. But Congress is going to play a role, one way or another, if these talks continue.
So are you expecting an agreement with Iran at any point?
I would hope not, because I don't think we can get an agreement with people who have no intention of keeping the agreement.
And then there's the situation in Yemen continuing to deteriorate. How do you see working with Iran on this deal for their...
While they're spreading terrorism?
That's right, in Yemen.
And it's not on the table. They're only talking about the nuclear agreement. While they continue to spread terrorism through, whether it's Libya, whether it's Gaza, whether it's Syria, whether it's Yemen, whether it's Iraq for that matter, they continue to spread terrorism, send money, send troops to cause havoc, to try to broaden their influence in the region. And I don't blame the Saudis for finally saying, hey, enough is enough. And we're not going to have this on our border. It's cause of great concern.
All of this while we have all of these domestic issues right now that you're dealing with. In terms of the debt ceiling, do you think that it's possible not to wait until the last minute to actually get an agreement in terms of some of these things we're talking about, in terms of the cap on defense spending, in terms of the other spending issues, tax reform? Or will this go out until September?
Listen, nobody here wants to default on our debt. And the United States is not going to default on our debt. No decision has been made about how we're going to deal with this, but we are going to deal with it. And I would argue we ought to do it sooner rather than later. But that's not quite the way Washington works.
So how do you see it happening then?
I don't know yet. When I know, I'll let you know.